It feels like mystery, but it's all a part of God's great history.
No great but Christ.
This was my best decision.
This is my life.
My love goes deeper with age. We've got a book of history. Now we can turn the
Great but
page.
Christ. This was my best decision. This is my life. My love grows deeper with age. We've got a book of history. Now we can turn the page.
Welcome to the Disciples History Podcast. My name is Rick Lowry. I am president of the Disciples of Christ Historical Society, and I am just so thrilled today to be interviewing my friend Yvonne Gilmore, who is the Executive Secretary of the National Convocation and Associate General Minister and General Minister, is it and Vice President? Is that the way?
General Minister of the Christian Church, yeah.
Okay, and Associate General Minister of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. Welcome, Yvonne. We are so happy to have you with us and so honored and so blessed. I wanted to begin by asking if you would just describe what you've done before and what has led you to this current position, which actually I think I forgot to say, interim executive Secretary of National Convocation. What has led you to this point? If you could just, you and I have been friends for a long time, but if you could give our friends out there a bit of your resume.
Absolutely. I was going to say, so I will, that would actually take a long time, but
Yeah,
I will
I know it
give
would.
a bit of a snapshot. But first, yeah, thank you so much, friend. So grateful, Reverend Dr. Rick Lowry. Yeah, I could go on about you and just do loud you in so many ways for your scholarship and how it blesses us, your leadership in the Historical Society, and really see your deep pastor's heart that you have. Yeah, what a gift you are. So I'm excited to be here. I just before serving in this role was privileged to serve as Associate Dean of Disciples Divinity House, the University of Chicago, and privileged to actually continue to lead something called the Living Justice and Anti-Racist Practicum in connection with DDHU Chicago at this state. But yeah, there, right, I got to do some with administrative roles and fundraising and got to teach the folks who were doing their field ed classes, as well as some pastoral care, and then did some things in terms of DEI and race and religion as well while I was at U Chicago. I've been on one of the core trainers with the Anti-Racism Initiative and Reconciliation Ministries for almost 15 years now. Wow. And have been working with congregations in their work, and then have done some more DEI kind of work, both with universities, non-disciples related, and companies and that sort of thing. And even
would you explain DEI?
Yes, that's right. I do. So DEI, right, is shorthand for diversity, right, equity, and inclusion. And I always say that the even though diversity kind of comes first in that acronym, that really I think equity, right, which just is us being aware, right, of structures of relationship structures of power, that's kind of the basis for, right, how we think about diversity and inclusion. That really equity is the foundation, and then we build on that in terms of what we make of diversity and inclusion. So yeah, have done those things and been reading and writing and thinking about that. I'm also a former church planter and was a chaplain for actually almost 10 years in a variety of places, and have done some other things I will name because it's a huge part of my identity that I'm a poet and spoken word artist, and have recorded with the Cornell West Theory, and I'm on a number of those records, and then do a good bit of performance and just work by myself, and that feeds my soul, is core to who I am as well. Yeah, through all of those roles, I've served on Higher Education Leadership Ministries Board. I should mention Helm as well. So And so thrilled. Yeah, that's where I have come from. And then in December of 2020, began serving in this role as interim administrative secretary of National Convocation and associate general minister. And am just so thrilled to be a part of this interim moment where, it's really a Kairos moment. I'm going to claim it as that. There's a whole lot of discord, and I think of David Tracy's Blessed Rage for Order. That there's a whole lot of kind of blessed rage for order, not exactly in the David Tracy sense, right? But but I think folks are crying out, right? And we have the kind of rage for order, and I believe it's a Kairos moment in our country, but it's also I'm claiming a Kairos moment in our church, and so it is my joy and privilege to journey with National Convocation as it looks back. I mean, National Christian Missionary Convention, was established in 1917. Right, there were Black disciples, right, who were connected with disciples, right, since the middle of the 1800s, since the 1800s. And so, 104-year history if we mark it in terms of NCMC, but certainly much longer than that. And so, what a privilege it is to look back, right, but to look back to then claim, right, what are those things that feed us and fuel us, and how do we serve, right, and be disciples today? And so I would say when I started, because a lot of what I've done is theological education, and I thought, maybe this is it's sort of a strange role, but formal universities are not the only setting, right, that really it's a part of the disciples' DNA to where theological education should be happening, right, in our churches, on the street corner, everywhere. And so I'm so grateful to be journeying together, and not only to look again at history, right, but to think about, right, how do our structures serve us, right, what are those things that enable us all to flourish, indeed to be movement for wholeness and share God's limitless love. So that's too much, but that's what I've been doing and what I'm up to.
Oh, that is not too much. That is fantastic. And of course, we've known each other through higher education circles, at least, initially. And we've already given folks a nice introduction to a great theologian, David Tracy.
That's right. That's right.
And his wonderful book, Blessed Rage for Order, which quotes a poem by Wallace Stevens, one of my favorite poets. So
that's right. That's right.
So this is a very erudite conversation that we're having here. But what else would you expect from a Yale and a University of Chicago person? So Yvonne, could you tell me, about how large is the African American community, disciples community represented by National Convocation? Do you have can you give us a sense of the congregations and the membership and
Yeah, absolutely. So there are actually a total between 600 and 700 congregations nationwide, and they also gather in conventions, fellowships, that sort of thing. So I referred to the National Christian Missionary Convention, and over time, I mean, they don't all quite line up with regions, though some of them kind of decided to just unite with the regions. But, for instance, the Texas Christian Missionary Fellowship, right, that still has about 45 congregations there, and certainly participates, right, in the life of the Christian church in the Southwest, but continues. I mean, they even actually just recently created a scholarship for someone who goes to Jarvis Christian College, historically African American school down there. And so, Texas Christian Missionary Convention, Mississippi Christian Missionary Convention, MOCAN, which is short for Missouri Kansas Fellowship, right, continues to meet. Oklahoma, Christian Missionary Convention, and so they're different sizes, right? And I think historically, right, it was the case, and I think continues to be the case, right, that we're a part of the whole church, right, and at the same time, in terms of looking at the specific needs, right, mindful of our social location and just the existential realities, right, of who we are, of race, the ways that we inhabit the world, and church. And so, there are special emphasis in ways that folks fellowship and nurture each other.
Well, even the very way that the National Convocation expresses its self-understanding through its slogan, which about one mission, one church. What I
Right.
can't remember exactly how the different elements go in that, but there's just a very strong sense of being whole church
Yes. Yes.
that I have experienced through the years. Anytime that I'm in fellowship with National Convocation, in so many ways, Convocation has just been a leader, an exemplar for the church as a whole, really continuously pressing us on our wholeness, our one churchness,
Yes.
our
Yes.
singular
Yes.
missionness.
That's
Um,
right. That's right. That's right. I was going to say, Rick, it's been honestly astounding to me as I dig in that I'm like, so 1917, right? This wasn't like a harmonious, period in history. There
uh,
was all kinds of social turmoil, and yet there was still its, National Christian Missionary Convention, not utterly separate, right? Connected to the whole church, and then in '69 with the merger, again, not a socially harmonious period, but there was still this determination that right, we don't believe God has called us to be separate, but that in fact,
yeah,
this what
yeah,
to me is a really audacious right claim
yeah,
that in fact we believe right God's going to make us a new church together. And as I've been talking to folks, I mean even John Folks I was chatting with, and he just was underscoring that like no, we really wrestled with what does it mean to be fully Christian and fully human. That
yes,
we are black by virtue, really, of the United States and social distinctions that were made around race. But as we sit with right the fullness of God's call and claim for us and who we are, that we can't ignore. I mean, yeah, I'd be naive to ignore what my skin means, right, when I walk out the
exactly,
door, right? But
exactly.
and at the same time, to follow right one who said right that there's neither Greek or Jew, neither male or female. That like, what does this mean about the identity that we're called to
Yeah,
inhabit and share and proclaim? And so yeah, I just yeah praise God for the example. That is, which part of why I'm excited about this conference. That is a part of our shared tradition and
yes,
shared history, right? And this determination that like we're not going to sort of choose sides to say one or the other, but to really claim, uh, you know, all of this together that God stakes a claim on us that
yeah,
we
yeah,
have to
yeah.
respond to.
Amen. What you're referencing there when you talked about the conference, you're referencing this conference sponsored by the Disciples of Christ Historical Society as part of our Kirkpatrick lecture series, but we're calling it the Kirkpatrick Conference, where we're bringing together scholars from around our church, a great diversity of all kinds of diversities,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
certainly anytime you get academics together, it's like you got a total mishmash of opinions about and strongly stated opinions about that. So this is going to be a conference. The title of it is Systemic Racism, Anti-Racism, and Reconciliation, which we're putting in quotes because um, you know justice and repair
Mhm.
are necessary parts of reconciliation. Everybody wants to just jump to the reconciliation part without doing,
No,
the hard work that really leads up to that kind of
yeah,
reconciliation. But systemic racism, anti-racism, and reconciliation in our shared history and tradition. And there just are, we are an enormously diverse church and an enormously diverse movement as
that's
the
right.
broader within a broader diverse movement has been called the Stone Campbell movement, and we will be having scholars from other Stone Campbell traditions who will be an important part of our conference as well. This is March 18th and 19th at Phillips Theological Seminary in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yvonne will be delivering a paper for us at that conference, and will of course be part of the final panel discussions that we have, where we ask ourselves, where shall we go from here? Our pastor, our general minister and president, Terry Hord Owens, will be with us throughout, and will send us out with our charge at the end. I'm just so thrilled that my friend Reverend Dr. William Barber is going to keynote the conference, and we have a group of scholars that is just unparalleled. And an important part of what we hope to do in this conference is to tell the stories, the broader story of the church. The broader story of our movement. It's an amazing story that we have, and certainly the folks who were instrumental in setting up the National Christian Missionary Convention, which is sort of the precursor institution to National Convocation. Right. There are two historical moments related to the National Christian Missionary Convention that are important for us to hold in mind, and that I want to talk about in our conversation here. One is 1917, and then one is 1969. And 1917 is the establishment of the National Christian Missionary Convention by this incredible, Renaissance person named Preston Taylor, who's like, it just kind of blows your mind. The kinds of things that he was able to do, and his continuing towering importance in the history of the state of Tennessee, for example.
That's right.
Tennessee State University comes out of, a school that he set up.
His legacy. That's right. Absolutely.
I mean, his legacy is just enormous in my home state of Tennessee and in the entire country. Because Tennessee State sent a lot of folks up north during the civil rights movement to organize things up there. So at any rate, and then 1969 was the merger agreement that brought together the National Christian Missionary Convention and the International Convention of Christian Churches. That's right. That really created our current Christian Church Disciples of Christ in the United States and Canada. These are two really significant events in our history that I want to step back and take a look at, and then I want to move to the person you're going to talk about at the conference, which is an amazing evangelist. And church leader at the national level, Sarah Lou Bostic, and apparently quite a good organist. And so I want to talk about Sarah Lou, but first I want to begin by talking about Preston Taylor, the things that kind of led up to the work that he did. Can you? I have another podcast where I'm going to interview Ed Robinson, doing a paper on Preston, on Preston Taylor. So we won't, go into him in the kind of depth that we'll go into with Dr. Robinson when we have our podcast. But at least, could you give us a broad overview of how that came about, and particularly, I mean, you set us up so well when you talked about 1917. That was kind of a contentious time in our history, as was 1968 and 69, which is kind of interesting that in these moments of great strife,
That's right.
we should have this kind of movement for wholeness
Yes.
in our church. So I'll quit talking and you start talking.
Yeah, no, it's all right. So yeah, I was gonna say I will. I get excited. I will say when I start talking about Preston Taylor, but I won't go into too much detail. But just will name that right that he was born. His parents were enslaved, and he himself was enslaved. Right, that he fought in the Civil War. Was a drum major in the army there, and then
In the Union Army, yeah.
Union Army, and then once emancipated, um, actually did some labor, and then moved over to came to Tennessee and started actually worked in one of the churches there in Disciples Church actually, but then he also opened up Greenwood Funeral Home and Greenwood
Yeah.
Cemetery and continued and want to name. I mean, I talked about him as a social entrepreneurial, right? Wasn't a term that was used in the 1800s, but he really was a social entrepreneur, right? In the sense that he didn't just create the cemetery and the funeral home because they would be lucrative, businesses to start, right? But it was to make space so that the least of these, right, could be buried, right, could have space
Could actually be buried
to
because
be buried,
because black bodies could not be handled
exactly,
in funeral
right,
homes and
yeah,
buried in cemeteries. I mean,
exactly, yeah,
this actually was a kind of radically prophetic act
yes.
on the part of Preston Taylor. So I'm
Exactly.
sorry.
Yeah, no, please. But that's what I wanted to underscore, right? Was because I was like, yeah, he wasn't just doing this to make money.
Yeah,
This was because there was no place for folks to be buried with dignity. And I'll just name, get to serve ex officio still on that board. It's actually still the most affordable place to bury your loved ones there, and it's expanded even since he passed. But so he starts the cemetery, he starts the funeral home, right? He also helped to found a bank right there for persons of color could go in terms of financing institution. And then, of course, in terms of Tennessee State University, that wasn't the name of it right
right.
at the time, but that, and then also even Greenwood Park. And since I started in the role, learned that it had actually burned down a few times, and they rebuilt that, and that there would be just thousands of people that would pass through and were served by.
And this was an amusement park.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that they would have large, kind of a state fair, where people of color would go, that sort of thing, twice a
Because
year.
they were not allowed to go
Go to
to
other places. Yeah, exactly.
the regular state fair.
That's
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah,
right. So yeah, I always say like he's is absolutely a model of Black excellence, but for me, it's just a model of just Christian American
yeah,
excellence. So that
yeah.
I mean, just was prodigious. And when I think about like he did more with less resources starting out, and so right, so he bequeathed this legacy to really the Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, and it has gone on to indeed bless the National Christian Missionary Convention as it continued. Right, he was the first president of that as they gathered, and there were at that time actually around 555 Black congregations back in 1917, and so their concern, right, was as with the rest of society, right, where you kind of had separate, but separate really and unequal,
Right.
right, that the concern was how are we going to resource and make sure that there's growth, and that the needs of the Black congregations are met, and they were mindful that they weren't central in the church structures, just as they weren't central in the structures of wider society. And so attention to starting new churches, attention to evangelism, right, and spreading the word and hiring evangelists, right, that were strategically placed, looking, building schools, right, and education institutions so that folks could be trained properly, so the clergy could have training as well, right, that they would organize and really attend to those things. Certainly someone prodigious enough to start all of those,
Right.
bank and college and cemetery. And so, so he, right, along with some others, in 1917, and right, and so I lift that up because it was like the World War I was, is around that time, right, that's going on. There's tremendous turmoil all around. I mean, there were race riots even
Yeah.
around the time of the that they would gather, and yet that didn't deter them. That didn't kind of halt or pause their determination. Right, that God, in fact, was calling them together to be, for race not to be the way the essential definer, right, of their relationships with one another, but that God was calling them together. So yeah, in 1917, it just is incredible that the National Christian Missionary Convention was formed, and so they did that work, and we're continuing to kind of revise the different fellowships and conventions, like I mentioned before, right, continue to develop and grow, and then before 1969, right, they initially started going, right, how do we continually integrate, right, more and more? I mean, and that was also similar to the kind of wider movement, right, in our culture to say, rather than us just have separate leadership roles, right, let's look at Christian education, let's look at evangelism, let's look at women's, the Christian Women's Board of Mission. Yeah, where would our church be without the Christian Women's Board of Mission?
Yeah.
And so looking at Black persons and persons of color in those roles, right, within the context of the national office that they had started exploring, right, administratively and strategically, right, how could that work? And so gratefully, it took some years, and it's actually been a joy to read minutes of meetings for over 30 years, them planning and
Right.
trying to figure out how do we do this, and also, right, I'm aware that I think it's worth, as we're talking about our shared history and story, right, I'm just aware of the beautiful disciples impulse, right, to be suspicious of denominational structures, to be suspicious of authority, this denomination, right, that didn't want to be called a denomination, right, that we were anti-denominational,
Right.
because we saw that division, right, as counter to the wholeness that we were claiming in terms of God's church.
Yeah.
And so I think, to knowing that was tough even to get to that place, right, where we would say we're a denomination, and then and for the merger to happen around that same time,
Yeah.
and for a national convocation to develop. And again, King had been assassinated not long before then. I mean, just tremendous social upheaval, and yet our conscious decision and prayerful decision, right, was we're gonna stake a claim together,
Yeah.
not divide.
I think that the a lot of folks don't realize the broader context of racist violence that was occurring, particularly around the time of 1917. I mean, this conference that we're having in Tulsa. I originally wanted to locate it in Tulsa. We originally were going to do it in 2021,
Okay.
at the 100th year of the so-called, the used to call it the Tulsa race riot.
Right.
Our terminology now is the Tulsa Massacre.
Yep.
That occurred in the Greenwood community in North Tulsa.
Yeah.
But kind of all through it, the thing that folks don't realize is that kind of thing was happening in a lot of places around that time. And of course, the revival of the Ku Klux Klan had become really important. We had an openly racist president of the United States who was extolling the wonderful historical veracity of this Birth of a Nation film that celebrated the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. So there just were a lot. I mean, this was a period of time,
Yes.
where there was a kind of sustained series of acts of racist violence.
Yes.
And you know and out of that, uh, you know, Preston Taylor in Middle Tennessee, in Nashville, Tennessee, you know, has these visions that of what's possible, of the new world that's possible, and it's just in just so many ways it's incredible. I don't want to just focus on him because there's a lot of other people. I mean, you know, it
Yes.
was
Yes.
not
Yes. Yes. Yes.
just Preston Taylor
Yep. Yep.
who
Yep.
did
Yep.
this, but just the witness and the commitment and the vision of the folks who started this, and of course the concerns that were being addressed by the establishment of the National Christian Missionary Convention
Hmm. Hmm.
to promote things like evangelism and, you know, new church establishment,
That's right. That's right.
which is how I'm going to transition to you know, the main topic of your presentation at our conference, and that's this amazing woman, Sarah Lou Bostick. How
Yes.
does Sarah Lou Bostick fit into this broader picture?
Yeah. So actually, I think what is a joy to me is the reality is she was a contemporary in many ways of Preston Taylor, right?
Yeah,
And so
little younger,
yeah,
but
yeah. Much. I mean, came before, and I think in many ways helped to lay the groundwork. Yeah, certainly not fully, but right, but helped to kind of set the stage in terms of evangelism and ministry, right, and mission. And so you know, she was president of the Negro Christian Women's Board of Mission. And so in that role, she actually did some fundraising and kind of helped to raise funds for schools in East Texas. They wanted to open a school there, yeah, for folks who were Black and needed support, you know, from the community. And so she wasn't native to East Texas, right, but came down through with the Christian Board of Mission and helped to raise money there, and was received well. She certainly is the first ordained African American woman. It was 1903 when she kind of connected there in East Texas, and a little before that, right, was ordained. Certainly, your website lifts up that right. She was an entrepreneur in terms of
right.
sewing and selling those things. I also think, I mean, and she and her husband, right, helped to actually start a congregation in Arkansas there as well. In Kentucky, though, 1868, right, is when where she was initially born. And then she really was an evangelist, not only, yeah, in Kentucky and Arkansas and Texas. Yeah, just was moving around and spreading the gospel. Certainly the Christian Women's Board of Mission, I mean, it has its own, yeah, just incredible history, but it was really sort of 18 years, right? 1899 is when she was working with Christian Women's Board of Mission. So to think about 1899 to 1917,
Right.
that sort of for 18 years she was doing this work, and then it's actually my understanding that she gave a pretty rousing speech before Preston Taylor was blessed and consecrated to serve in the role. And yeah, reading about that was blessed my own spirit, her strong message, because I was like, she actually was giving strong messages before him, not just on that day,
Right.
right? but you know, making a way, and it's about, right, what we do in community, right? That yeah, I say to folks all the time, like my job, in fact, is to make sure our churches shine, is to make sure our leaders shine, is to make sure that administratively, policy wise, and relationship wise, that our covenant, right, that we're articulating it, we're telling the stories, because there's so many stories to tell. And
Yeah.
so, you know, hearing about all the folks that she worked with, and I love this understanding, right, that you know, that it isn't just, it's about getting out there and spreading the message and building relationship, right, and providing resources right, in particular communities, right? That's how the work gets done. So there wasn't just kind of one place, right, where we
Right.
receive, but that she really was planting seeds
Yeah,
and
just all over.
exactly, exactly,
All
exactly.
over.
Right, right, right. And I actually think even talking about right her and Preston Taylor, uh, yeah. So I'll say I often hear people talk about like a crisis of leadership, but I really do think we actually have a crisis of community, not just a crisis of leadership. And by that, what I mean, right, is shared identity and trust is what you need for community. And so to me,
Yeah.
so much of what yeah, right, what they were up to was like trying to create shared identity, trying to build structurally, right, build in trust to go structurally, right. We need to be connected in our church and in our communities and have our education institutions, have our churches, have our our women and leaders, right, be connected to each other in this way so that we're building community. I think when I hear sometimes if folk talks about Black Lives Matter and they'll say it's a leaderful movement, it is leaderful. That feels very disciples to me, because I think we've always had a movement that's
Many
full of
leaders.
leaders, and
Yeah.
and the reality, right, is they couldn't be effective if it was just one, but it was
Right.
because right there were their contemporaries around them trying to figure out how do we connect and move forward together, because in fact what we're doing is making some shared claims, right, not just acting alone. So yeah, Sarah Lou Bostick, first ordained African American woman, was just tremendously prolific, and I'm looking forward to telling more of her story in March.
Yeah, yeah. First ordained disciples.
Disciples,
Woman.
yes, yes, African American woman, yes, yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
Again, just a towering figure in our history, whose story has not been as broadly told in our church as it should be.
Yes.
Fortunately, we now have an actual endowment fund set up with our
Yes.
Christian Church Foundation
Foundation, that's great.
in Sarah Lou Bostick's name, and so in her honor we are investing money to serve the mission. So I just think it was such a brilliant idea.
Yes.
To have this woman who was just, I mean, her life was about building up and planting and expanding the witness, the gospel witness of the church, and I'm just so happy that we have that fund set up and that we're recognizing her, and I'm really hopeful. Not only that at this conference, but in the book that you plan to write for us that will be forthcoming, hopefully
Yes.
not too far down the line.
That's right.
We
That's
will
right.
we will get this done maybe before I retire. I hope
Yes,
so.
absolutely. Absolutely.
But we will. Um, um, uh, Remind me, was Sarah Lou Bostick instrumental in or participating in the formation of Jarvis College in?
So actually, it was a different school, but
Is
it
it
but it,
different
it it's
school?
but it's in that same area. Yeah, Hawkins, Texas is in East Texas, and
Okay,
so this
okay.
school actually is a kind of a precursor to what
Jarvis.
became Jarvis, and they in the school that she helped to raise money for, though. I mean, they talk about so a lot of disciples will say head and heart, but they say hand and head and heart. I think it was actually William Alphen, to know, right, hands in terms of trade and that sort of thing, but also to articulate the hope that the school would also have elements of higher education kind of connected to it. And so I thought it was a blessing that they got there, they got to a place where they could found Jarvis Christian College, but that there were some schools that they set up
Yeah,
into that, and
yeah.
and she was instrumental in those efforts.
Well, as we move toward the end of our conversation today, which kind of amazes me that we've already gotten to the point that it's time for us to wrap up. I've been enjoying this. I've been enjoying this so much. I just want to pose one final question to you, and that is, how would you say the lessons we can learn from these incredible leaders like Sarah Lou Bostick and Preston Taylor, and particularly in the context of the moments in which they live? What do they say to us in this moment in which we live, where we have folks, well, running around with assault weapons, playing police or something. I don't know. And
Right.
so anyhow, these are difficult and contentious times in which we live.
Yes.
And what does the example of the lives of Sarah Lou Sarah Lou Bostick and Preston Taylor, what is that?
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
lessons can we derive? What can we learn?
Yeah. So I think, Rick, two things come to mind for me, and as you're lifting up, I'm just going to sort of name, right, that the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. I wasn't so surprised, right, but that to think that it's okay for a 17-year-old to carry a rifle and to be in that situation. It's beyond disturbing.
Hmm.
It didn't sit
It's
well.
frightening.
It is, yeah, just tremendously frightening. So, that was on my mind like 5 minutes before I'm seeing the verdict. A few minutes before I logged on to chat with you, and absolutely do think two things. One, I think I'm also so excited about this conference, and I think one of the lessons is there's stories that have not been told that really need to be told, and those and they're important. But one, I think they build community, but they also not only tell us who we have been, but tell us who we can be.
Yes.
And so I'm chastened, right, admonished, and encouraged, right. And it for me is just like I feel audacious, right, when I think about people who have been a part of this movement for wholeness, people who have been sharing God's limitless love for so long, right, who in moments, right, where you would have every rational reason to retreat, right, that there's every rational reason to go, what are we doing this for? That's right, and hide, and or every rational reason, right, to go, maybe the weapons of our warfare are flesh and blood, right, but that for us to still claim that the weapons of our warfare are spiritual and are not just flesh and blood.
Right.
That we must not ignore these bodies. We inhabit these bodies, and we need to tell the truth about what it means to be really fully human and really fully Christian. And that, I just love, however tough it may be for me to be a woman today. Sarah Lou Bostick.
I know.
My God.
And in that historical moment,
Right.
Preston Taylor, in that historical moment in Nashville, Tennessee.
Right. No. I mean, and I'll also say there's never been a female administrative secretary. I am the interim,
Yep.
but there's never been an administrative secretary. And even coming in, I mean, right, folks said, we're not sure if folks are sort of ready for this. I just said, I'm going to love, be gracious. I'm always going to give an account for the hope of Jesus Christ that is in me.
Amen.
No matter the circumstance. And to see, I mean, that's what she was doing in 1899, right? In, 1903, you're fundraising in East Texas. Like, my God. So it's like, if she could do that, if she could keep going, if, in 1917, I mean, that around those same months that they were meeting, there were riots. Folks were in New York marching down Fifth Avenue, for freedom. KKK presence, all of that to go. No, God called us to be together, to yet, stake a claim, not when it's easy, not when it's convenient, but just because it's true. And that in fact, that I mean, and yeah, and I think what excites me, and I always say this, that like, look, there were there were Black people at Cane Ridge, um, they're enslaved persons, but that like I believe like that God and God's infinite wisdom knew that like the children of former slave masters and the children of former slaves would worship and then dare to create a just church and a just society.
Yeah.
That they were trying to do that some years ago, and I'm excited about and I think the conference actually right is key because as you signal right, we do have to have these moments where we do tell the parts of the story that we don't always focus on that are tougher to sit with, but that as we also tell those stories and really kind of just tell that truth and acknowledge hurt and harm, right, and acknowledge the trauma that has caused us to be stuck, but that we then claim and we can walk forward together. And I think even as I started and during this time where I've said, okay, so the merger happened, so what's changed, right? Are our relationships different? Structurally, like, right, how do we live into this? Because I see it as right, not just about administrative job capacities, right, but really it was we're committed to collaboration and transformation together. And so to really tell those stories about how do we collaborate and transform the church and the world yesterday, and then what does that equip us to do? And I think in fact ultimately there's some hurt to acknowledge, a lot of hurt to acknowledge, but then I think it's actually deeply empowering, right, when we do that.
Well, this is you've given us a wonderful word to finish up this podcast on, and to go out and you've given us our orders for what we need to be doing. Yvonne, I am just so thrilled that you agreed to do this, and I'm always so happy to talk to you, and you're just such a wonderful colleague, and really
like I said,
appreciate you.
yeah, I'm so grateful for your example and of course Sharon as well. And thank you for the privilege to talk in this moment. And yeah, I'm super excited about being together in person. I
Yes,
can't leave that
yes,
out.
in Tulsa. But
Yeah.
these are moments that call for the kind of courage and wisdom of our ancestors, like Sarah Lou Bostick and Preston Taylor. These are Bostick and Taylor moments. We need courage, and we need commitment. And well, our church expresses its gratitude to you and our love for you. And thank you so much for being willing to join us on this. And God bless.
Blessings, the joy is mine.